Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Seeds for Impact. In our last episode, we covered 3 key steps to building a memorable and purpose-driven brand: clarity, consistency, and storytelling. Today, I want to bring this conversation to life with a real-world example. Now, it's one thing to talk about branding in theory, but it's another to see how someone identified a gap in the market, followed their passion, and built a brand that is rooted in purpose and values. That is why I'm super excited to introduce today's guest, Gabi Fiorentino, the founder of Nest Earth. Nest Earth is on a mission to make eco-conscious living a no-brainer. And Gabi has such an inspiring story of how her personal experiences led to creating a brand that not only meets a need, but also makes a lasting impact. So in this conversation, we're going to dive into how Gabi saw that gap, turned her vision into action, and is continuing to grow a brand that people can truly connect with. Welcome, Gabi.
Thank you for having me, Hannah.
Excited to have this conversation. Why don't you start by telling us where you're coming from, a little bit about Nest Earth, and how you got the business started?
Well, I guess where I'm coming from, I'm originally I'm from Dominican Republic, and I came to the US, and I started my career in architecture. And so that path really drove me into sustainability and being more focused into that. And I think that's where, once I became a mom and how to apply sustainability into parenthood and this battle of convenience and being told what to do, that's really where it was the stem of starting Nest Earth. But the real story really happened at 2 a.m. while I was nursing my baby boy. And I was just sleep deprived apart from everything. But I was staring at all the stuff he had around his room and really reading up. That's essentially trying to make myself busy. But I just started to see oh my God, I am polluting his future while raising him. And it just that was a complete realization that happened at 2 a.m. And I just started to honestly, I started to cry because I was looking at him and feeling powerless. And what can I do? This is how I'm being told I need to parent. These are the things I'm being told I need to have. But there was no real guidance as to how to make it better, how to make it more eco-conscious, how to make it more healthier. And then going down Google spirals and soon after that, it's well, how can I make this better? And really that's what fueled me to create Nest Earth, because I saw that gap. And I was well, I cannot be the only person, their parent, going crazy here and asking all these questions. I'm pretty sure there are other people. And so I started talking to see if I was the only crazy lady in the playground. And I started to realize no, they're just, these conversations are not just happening as a norm for parenting. And it's we want to do it, but we don't know how to do it or where to start or if what we're doing is good enough. And so really making that the norm of parenting, I think it's really how I started to see it and find, okay, what are the right supports that we need? We want trusted space, trusted voices. If I want to ask an expert, I want to make sure that they are aligned with what I am looking for.
Yeah.
Not to prescribe me something for my kid that I know it's potentially harmful and it's maybe not necessary, right? So walking that line and finding the right experts, but also the right products and where can I find a curated, trusted space for this, where I can also talk with other parents and not feel so isolated and crazy. And so but avoiding that whole polarized, right? Because it's a strong topic that can get very, polarized really right away. Everybody has very strong opinions. And I am the type of person where I'm well, unsubscribed. I don't want to deal with that. I rather know, how can I be ask and have a safe space to ask these questions, but receive answers from not somebody else's opinion, but a trusted resource, right? Mm-hmm. And feel comfortable in that. because otherwise I'm just going to keep Googling until I figure it out. But I think like that's really what fueled starting Nest Earth and seeing that other parents needed it too and making it happen and figuring out, well, how can we make this happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you have a really interesting challenge that I would love to touch on at some point in today's conversation about um, making sure that everything about your brand is not just aligned with your personal values and making sure that all your products and things are safe, but you also have that piece of having to navigate any product, any expert that you are going to be promoting or bringing up in conversation to parents. Like you also have to go through a process to vet them and make sure that they also align with your values. So you have that added piece of really like brand authenticity and communication.
Yes, totally agree. Like everything has to be aligned. And every time I talk to an expert, it's like we need to make sure that we are aligned in one of these three pillars, whether it's wellness, sustainability, or parenting. And you need to serve families and also the way they serve, like, like it has to be aligned with what we're saying. I don't want to get an expert that is going to push a view into a parent where it's like, no, that is not necessary. What, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is more like somebody that's not pushing you into doing something like, oh, you need to do it this way because this is how you're going to reduce waste. It's like, no, we're parents, we're humans. Like they need to have that basic understanding that it's like, oh, see if this works and let's see what makes sense for you based on where you're at. Like it really meeting the parents where they're at. Like those are the types of people I am drawn to because they're the ones that understand the realities and the craziness of life. And like being able to understand that and be like, okay, let's work towards what you want to do. What are the goals that you want to do? And then like really understand that and bring that on. And I think that's part of creating that authenticity and that connection that goes through our messaging too. It's like, it's okay. Oh my God, you bought that and your kid ate something that had red dye 40. Everything is fine. Don't worry about it. Let's go back. It's okay. Let's just figure it out. Like now you know better and see where you want to go from there. Like, it's like no need to like my whole world is gonna implode if like something bad happens.
Yeah, and understanding too, just that even if you have a framework for how you're trying to live, same thing with a business, if you have a framework for how you're trying to do your marketing, how you're trying to bring in clients, there are still different paths you can take to reach the same goal, right? Like it's not going to look the same for everybody. So I'd love to talk more about as you were forming this idea for Nest Earth, how you knew that this was going to resonate beyond you and the initial circle of parents that you were talking to.
Yes. So I actually did 2 rounds of market research. And what by that, I mean not surveys that I just handed out. I actually had conversations with about 30 parents, like one-on-one conversations. Like they were supposed to be like 15 minutes, 30 minutes long, but they ended up being longer than that. But really trying to capture like what are the things that are holding you back? Like what motivates you to do this? Why is it? What are the obstacles that you're facing? And really understand that. And then taking that and putting it into practice, right? Like I started testing it out. It's like, well, what model? Because then I did all the research, the market research, which is like really great to understand that and understand what I need to do in the messaging. But it doesn't really shape the business model when it comes to this type, right? Like trying to figure out, is this going to be a resource? Is this going to be a newsletter? Is this going to be what does it look like? And understanding like where their biggest pain points were is like feeling isolated, not knowing where to start, not knowing what to trust. And so those were the biggest three. And how to start creating that. So obviously immediately to mind is like, well, I want to do a community, right? So you feel less isolated. You know that you have a trusted space to go to. But how that community looked like was the validation process, right? What worked, what didn't work. And initially I was like, well, is this going to be a membership? And then I tested out a membership model, and it didn't really work because parents don't want another membership, another thing to put money on. And understanding those nuances and talking to them. I think that's the most valuable thing is when you're validating, keep a line of communication, talking to them and refining that business model. And so when afterwards I was like, well, the mission is to make this accessible, to make it a no-brainer for parents to be more eco-conscious and make this the norm of life, of how parenting is. And going back to that, I was like, well, if it's free, I really need to make this work, because I cannot make it free. And then how is the business going to continue and provide all the value? Well, because I am going through a vetting process with experts and going through very thorough vetting process, I was like, well, this is where I'm spending a lot of my time. What if I am not charging the parents, but I do charge the experts to be able to go through that vetting process, and then if approved, then they have to essentially maintain that membership, right? And so fueling it from a different side, because now it creates a win-win situation. Now because of that vetting process, they're being presented into a trusted space to parents, and they're share their knowledge because they're brilliant at what they do. And there's so many different things that you can support parents, and really starting to curate that space, right? And be able to figure out that model is really through that validation process. It's talking to the parents and going back to the original kind of mission and what is it that you're trying to do, and not losing sight of that vision. And I guess it just takes different tweaking. Even the messaging, the core authenticity of the messaging stays the same, using their words, saying, I feel like I'm losing my mind. My parents don't understand why I am doing this. And well, how to communicate to that, and maintaining that kind of conversations and putting that in our branding too. This is who we are. We're making it approachable for a reason, because sustainability can go in different ways, right? The way you're talking about it has to come from a human level, and the way you're presenting yourself coming from a human level. So I think that really helped in the messaging and the validating process too.
Yeah, and I love that you touch on just the idea of having to pivot as you're validating the business, right? And the market research. One of the things that I talk to people a lot about when it comes to any sort of marketing, branding, website development is really the need to test things out, to validate a product or a service, to get feedback from people, to do the less fun work, so to speak, of trying to make sure that your mission is going to land and that you're impacting the right people. You have to put in a lot of that, those foundational pieces in the grunt work to make sure that you are really communicating the right thing in order for your business to be sustainable in the long run, whether that's for business growth or sustainable for yourself so you don't get burnt out. So I'd love to hear kind of on that note about, as you were pivoting, if there were any specific brand values that you had that helped to ground you so that you were still staying anchored even as you were making shifts.
Yes, there were. The biggest values, I think, were seeing parents as protector and having that idea of intergenerational knowledge, long term, and values grounded. I think there were a lot of the values that we, the brand values that we had is having that authenticity, meeting people where they're at, understanding that parents have power, like we are not powerless, and how to give that back. How can we make raising healthier kids easier? Like all of these things were really shaping the entire process because that's what we were rooted on. It's how to make raising healthier kids easier, not a rabbit hole that everybody's like, what is the secret formula? Like there's no secret formula, but like really trying to make it accessible and clear, easy to understand, like no jargon or buzzwords. It's like, no, this is what this is. Easy to understand. I think like all of those were really the values that kept us grounded. Is like, how can we meet people where they're at? How can we make this accessible? And how can we keep in mind that this is an intergenerational journey and how this is being passed down. So I think like having those three pillars of like sustainability, wellness, and parenting work together. Like they are feeding each other. They're not separate from each other, right? And going back to like a healthy person is also a healthy planet. Like it's the same thing because we are biological beings. And if we're doing healthy things for ourselves, it's going to be also healthy for the planet too. And so really rooting into, I think those were really the values that were guiding it and grounding and cementing even further. It's like, we are not powerless. Our actions do matter. And being able to ground that and make sure everything aligned with that. So whenever there was a pivot, like going back to that really helped because like that was already the solid foundation. It's a matter of like, okay, what do we keep building on it?
Yeah. I'm curious to hear more too about when you're talking about communication and staying rooted in those values. One of the things that we see a lot in the sustainability space is the use of, specific buzzwords and trying to like elicit a specific emotion because of the language they were using. And, obviously there's a risk of greenwashing in that and people misusing that. I'd love to hear more about ways that you ensure that you are communicating authentically in a space that sometimes has a lot of tension between, like pushing sustainability in the right way.
The first few things I started to do was I started saying eco-conscious, right? Instead of sustainability. Really try to avoid the buzzwords, but when they are mentioned, it's like, okay, let's break down this concept if needs to break down, right? What is sustainable parenting? Well, it could be different things. It could be you want to reduce plastics, you want to go non-toxic, or you want to feel like you're a minimalist, right? You want to reduce your waste. You want to be more mindful, go outside more. Like there are so many different definitions for that word. And I feel like that's where, because these buzzwords are so big, they can be taken into different directions and appropriated differently. And that's why I feel like I say eco-conscious for that reason most of the time. But when I do say like eco-friendly or sustainability, I try to be like, this is why, like as specific as possible. It's not like saying the word and then putting a dot behind it. It's like, no, this is eco-friendly because it has done X, Y, and Z, right? What is the impact? Like, I think like the more specific we are behind those, like after those buzzwords are mentioned, the less likely there is to be confusion or falling to the greenwashing trap. Because I've also noticed like most of the time people have good intentions when they say these words, but it's because they're so vague, that's where they fall into the greenwashing trap. And like being very clear in communication is like, hey, this is something we're trying to accomplish. We are not there yet. Like also like going back and being human. Like I think when a brand is human, it's like they're being honest. They're being like, hey, I don't know if it's packaging. I think it's like the like easiest one to pick at, but it's like, hey, we want to reduce our packages, our packaging, and like our waste. But we are not there yet, but we are working towards that, but we haven't found the right solution yet. And thank you for bearing with us. Like literally a simple email saying that or a message saying that, I feel like has so much more impact than if you just say eco-friendly packaging and then like people see it and it's not really that eco-friendly because you have like all these other people on top of paper on top of paper. And I think like owning the imperfection is I think like the best thing you can do when it comes to this space. Not necessarily having to say like, if you look at Nestor, like it doesn't really say, oh, we're a sustainable brand or sustainable parenting for like, it just doesn't say that until you like go into it. It's like, oh, they're in wellness and sustainability. Like it's really rooted in the clear communication and the words that we use and like how to explain that it's like this is what we offer, right? It's just I think like that's how we're cutting through the noise. It's like really going back to a human level and be like owning that imperfection. It's like not everything is perfect, but we're working towards it.
Yeah, yeah. And there have been different studies the past couple years that have shown that when brands are being upfront about those things and when they are genuinely trying to change how they're structuring their business, how they're offering their products and their services, that that's not only resonating with people, but people are willing to pay a little bit more premium of price as well. So I think there's a real opportunity for organizations to lean into that, to be their authentic selves, and to, especially in the age of AI, to be very human first and human focused as a way to differentiate themselves. What are other ways you are differentiating Nest Earth and making it really memorable for parents?
I think the component that there is a community so they're able to interact with other parents and build those relationships and having expert be part of that ecosystem. I think like that's something that hasn't really been modeled before. But one of the things that really works is connecting not only on a virtual space, but also on a local level and with local businesses. So parents are able to like find their local nest and meet with other parents around their area. But also we're able to like partner with local experts as well or businesses and like make sure they also have those local resources. I think like that, thinking about it locally really has helped because that's where parents are. They want to be like, well, where can I take my kid? How can I do activities in a local sense? But also having that safe space virtually. I also think like the other thing is we are starting to build out a marketplace so that it's easily searchable. And that itself, it's like a curated marketplace, like we'll say like why and everything is in there. So it's really creating this all-in-one space where you can find not only the experts, but and like the products as well, and be able to find your community because it is very unique. Like not every parent will be aligned in those values. And so it's like you'll be able to really find your tribe. Like if you say like, oh, I really don't want to use this shampoo because of this and this and that, they'll get it. Like people will get it instead of like staring at you like, why don't you want to use a shampoo? Like that's a crazy lady. So it's like really be able to, I think those are our biggest differentiators, like really being able to like pull all those in and making it work as an ecosystem and making it work together in a way that keeps it open, keeps it friendly, keeps it fun. And it's not like doomsday scenario. And like, if you don't do this, everything is gonna like go to like kind of die, or I don't know. It's like, you need to don't do that. Don't vaccine. Like, everybody has like different things, but like being like, you're not ready for that. That's okay. Like, this is a space where it's safe and it's more about the fun because, like, you and the optimism too, like, you make more change, more impact when you're having fun, when your kids are having fun with you, you're learning more, you're absorbing more. And therefore, it really opens it up. And I think like that's one of the biggest things is maintaining that and not feeding into the polarized messages that drive attention to everyone, right? That are not really monitored on Facebook sometimes. It's like, oh my God, what is happening to that girl? But really monitoring and making this feel like a safe space.
Yeah, I love all those things that you touched on, and just the idea of a brand that is safe and is encouraging and welcoming of different perspectives and people who are all coming together trying to learn. And I think that it's great that you're doing that, and I'm super excited about the marketplace. One more question before we kind of wrap up. You've talked a lot about impact. Obviously, any business owner is going to be thinking about revenue, how they can bring in money to keep the business going. And obviously, that's an important part of a business. What are other ways that you are measuring impact for Nest Earth beyond just the money and the revenue?
I think the biggest way is, honestly, I feel like it's through feedback and testimonials, like seeing, because it is measurable to a certain extent with parents, like they see progress in how they start to interact, how the changes that they're doing are affecting, like, are changing their lives, right? Are creating different changes. Sometimes you see immediate changes. Other times it takes a little bit, but I think like that's one of the biggest metrics is like, how are we changing or transforming each family's lives like at a time, right? Every single one is going to go through a different transformation. And when they share those wins and it's like, oh my God, I just switched to this and I just saved this much money. Cause like a lot of the times it's like changing that mindset is, or like saying like, I was able to like successfully communicate to my parents that please don't bring plastic toys without it like causing an apocalyptic scenario. So it's like really talking, learning those stories, sharing those stories, and having that feedback of how they've been transformed in their life.
Yeah, I think that is sometimes an underrated measure as well of impact. And the intangibles oftentimes are kind of hard to identify and hard to put any sort of like quantitative data to, but we definitely can't underestimate that impact. Just a couple final rapid fire fun questions before we conclude. What is your favorite color at the moment?
Oh, blue. It's always been blue.
That was such an easy answer for you.
Yes.
Have there been any songs stuck in your head as of late?
Oh my God, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And I have no idea. My daughter just keeps singing it.
Finally, how can listeners connect with you and with Nest Earth?
Well, you can connect with me via like Nest Earth Co. or via Instagram, or also at Gabriella Fiorentino. You could also always shoot me an email like at hello@nestearth.com. And I'm always answering my emails. I think like those are the 3 biggest ways that you can always connect with me.
Wonderful. Well, we will link all of those in the description so you can go ahead and follow along. Thank you so much, Gabby, for taking time out of your day to talk to us about your work at Nest Earth. I could just hear how passionate you are about this topic, and I'm so grateful that you are leading the charge in this. Your purpose-driven brand is really a powerful example of how to create a solution for a gap in a way that is authentic and is also sowing seeds for future generations. So in our next episode, we will continue the conversation on branding and go deeper into the subject of how to make your brand stand out in a crowded and competitive market. Thanks for listening to Seeds of Impact, and we'll see you next time.